So you could say that I have quite a lot of experience working with C# and the Unity editor. I mean, I have been making tutorials for the past, I forgot how long. Something I don't have an experience in is working under immense amounts of pressure. So I think it is time I challenge myself. I want to make my first ever 2D mobile game in only one day. This shouldn't be hard, right? So immediately the first thing I did was make a Trello board to do organized. And for the first thing that I will do is make the art for the game. So now in Piskel, I made a bunch of different assets that I know I will use. I made zombies, weapons, menu buttons, and some environment tiles like walls and floor tiles. By the time I finished making all the base art, I was 2 hours into the 10 hours of making this game. Why did it take so long? Well, let's say, I lack a particular set of visual skills. After I made all the art, I brought them all into Unity and it was time to get started on making the game. The first thing I did was make a small area for the player to roam around using the tiles and... Okay, I gotta fix that. After making the arena, it was time to make the player movement. To help me with the movement, I skipped through this Brackeys video on using a virtual joystick for mobile. It wasn't much of a hassle since there was a free Unity asset package that had a bunch of mobile joysticks to use that was introduced by Brackeys themselves. This will be in the description. Now after a little bit of messing around and matching the keyboard, you have complete movement using a virtual joystick. After adding movement, I allowed the player to basically stare at the completely opposite direction as instructed. I added player looking. The red joystick here would double up as a shooting button. This would be implemented later. After a quick lunch break, I started working on adding in weapons. At first I kind of overcomplicated by using class inheritance for the weapons, even though I could have just used a simple interface. I also tried to use a particle system for the bullets, but I forgot that particle systems don't support 2D collisions. So I had to scrap an entire system and create one from the ground up. For this system, I used actual rigid body objects. I also added in a particle system that would play where any bullet has an impact, just to add some more emphasis. After completing a lot of the main player systems, I now started to consider sound. To make some sound effects, I used SFXR, which was a free tool for Ludum Dare 48, which was quite some time ago. And after taking some time to make an audio effects system for the game, you can now get some audible input for your weapon. When I finished implementing audio, it was now time to start working on the main menu, which I knew would take a lot of time. I wasn't confident that I would be able to implement a weapon switching system before fully implementing enemies, so I just put a nice coming soon sign over the supposed shop button. For the settings, you can only change the audio and graphics quality, which really just disables some post-processing effects. To save the settings, I just used the Unity player prefs to save all the data. For the title art, I literally just went into Piskel and just went MS Paint letter drawing style. I did my best with it. And after putting on some colors, it feels like it is much better looking than it is supposed to be. Or that's just me because I made it. It probably looks really bad to you guys. I also wanted to add in zombies that just wander in random directions in the main menu, but I thought it would take too long, so as a little 5-minute crafts life hack, I just used a particle system with the different zombies as textures. And it turned out fairly decent. I was absolutely right that the main menu would take a while. When I was satisfied with the result, I burned out a whole hour on top of maybe 20 minutes of the audio implementation. Right now it was 4 p.m. and I had about 4 hours and 40 minutes left on the clock. I knew that I couldn't implement a lot of the things I had really planned, so I had to cut down. For the enemies, I made a simple corridor that gets cut off, and that is where the enemies would emerge from. For the movement of the enemies, what I did was use the A* pathfinding library. The implementation wasn't that hard as Brackeys made a video on the matter. The link to the Brackeys video and the A* pathfinding library will be in the description. It took me another whole hour or so to have an entire system complete with damaging visuals, the player getting damaged, and a scoring system. With now a mere 3.5 hours, I spent this time to get a pausing system in place, implement high score saving, unique enemies, and speaking of unique enemies, I added in this really fast, high HP enemy out of frustration. I was coming across an error that seems to happen for basically no reason, and after like half an hour of doing literally the same thing over and over again, basically me going insane, it fixed itself. What? Anyways, after fixing that error, I checked my time left and it was at the 2-hour mark. I started to really scramble around here. I didn't have a game over state, and since I wanted to keep some sense of quality, I imported a tweening library from DemiGiant. And when the player dies, death particles spawn at the player, and the different buttons would ease out of the screen, and the game over screen would come down and tell you the zombies you've killed, the highest amount of zombies you've killed, and whether or not you got a new high score. Having to set up the tweening and timings took a little bit since there was a lot of trial and error on my end. So I lost some time on that just messing around with different tweening options and setting up the high score display. I also had to make a separate script that would make the retry button and exit button work properly. And I did a few more things to ensure that there should be no loopholes or bugs that can break the game when playing it. Now for the very last thing I can remember when working on the game was going back to the main menu and making the play button actually work. And with only 1 hour left, I managed to make my first ever 2D mobile game, and this is what the final result looks like. This game will not be released anywhere yet. I want to take some time to refactor some code and clean it up before actually releasing it. But I will let you guys know if I do release it on the Play Store. Oh, and also, like and subscribe as it helps me an awful lot. And with that said, I hope to see you all in the next video. Goodbye.